like to introduce Joe Pulizzi. How are you, Joe?
I'm doing fine, Trevor. How are you doing?
Yeah, very well, thank you. And you're the founder and can I say the godfather of content marketing? You run the Content Marketing Institute. Um, is it true you came up with the phrase content marketing? Can I attribute that to
Uh,
you?
you know what? We can never find exactly who came up with it. I did start using the term in 2001, and probably we started using it first in commerce more than anyone else. So 2007 is when we really came out and pushed it around the time Content Marketing Institute was born. But yeah, boy, it's been 13 years I've been using that term, so I'm glad it's stuck.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much entrenched. In fact, you've caused one of the big buzzwords in the
Yeah, I'm
industry. So
sorry about that. Didn't mean to do that,
that's
but
all on you,
glad it
buddy.
worked
That's all on you.
out.
Now, reason for catching up today, it's really good because you've just released it's the third Content Marketing in Australia 2015 Benchmarks, Budgets and Trends report. Hot off the press. We'll go through the key takeaways, but what's your helicopter view? Any surprises? Let's get into it.
Well, first of all, we continue to see Australian marketers are leveraging content marketing in all kinds of different ways. So that we like, from social media down to traditional opportunities such as white papers and ebooks and print magazines and whatnot. So from the usage standpoint, it's great, but it also tells us that we have a long way to go when it comes to maturity in content marketing, where we're seeing, I believe the number is 29% effectiveness. So if we're seeing 71% of the marketers don't feel quite effective at content marketing, we know we've got a long way to go. So good, it's great. Usage is great, but we still are very immature. Even though this is a very old discipline, we're very immature at our content marketing approach in Australia.
So one of the key takeaways is that slightly fewer Australian marketers consider their companies effective at content marketing. So it was 33% last year and 29% this year. Would that also be because this year they've piled into it a little bit more and then said, oh my Lord, what's going on?
I would agree with that. I think that a lot of people say, oh, hey, we could publish content. Let's do Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and blogs, and this is fantastic. And then they get into it and they're like, oh, this is hard. We have to figure out what's our content niche. What are we trying to do for this? Why are we on Facebook in the first place? How are we trying to build an audience? We need to be consistent at this. We need to release content on a regular basis. We're not used to doing that. We're used to working in campaigns. So it makes sense. Content marketing is a different approach than we've done in traditional marketing. So it takes more of a publishing or media company mentality to do that. And I think that we're starting into that transition. Started from experimental. Now we've got a lot of companies doing it, but they're saying, look, this is not as easy as we thought it would be.
Yeah. And so the report, which you've done in conjunction with the Association of Data-Driven Marketing and Advertising, ADMA, in Australia, and that was with for-profit companies. So this is not non-profits. This is just companies out to make a buck.
You got it. That is correct.
Right. So let's look at the ROI, because that's always the big thing on everyone's lips, in terms of CMOs and now the CEOs, and now it's getting into the C-suite, of course. Only 20% of respondents say their organisations are successful at tracking the ROI of content marketing. So what have you got to sort of say about that? Because would it be something to do with the strategy, that they haven't done their strategy in the first place?
Trevor, it has everything to do with the fact that the majority of people that are using businesses that are using content marketing in Australia don't have a strategy. So that's the thing. If you're going to ask me, Joe, what are the critical findings of this report? I'm going to say we found two critical differentiators from those Australian marketers that are very, very effective at content marketing and those that aren't. And that is, one, they actually document their strategy. They write it down. They have it in some kind of form that they can go back to over and over again, and they don't have it in their heads. It seems like this isn't rocket science here. This is like we need to actually write down our strategy for content marketing. So that's one. And the second thing is they take that plan and they follow it closely. They review it on an ongoing basis. So those are the two critical things, which it's so funny. These are simple things. These are things that, of course, you would think that they're going to document their strategy. And of course, they're going to review it on an ongoing basis, but they're not. So I think that that's the number one thing. And those people that are effective at looking at, say, hey, we are hitting our ROI number, we are hitting our goals, we are effective with content marketing. Those are the ones that are writing it down and reviewing it. And the ones that aren't are experimenting. They're winging it. They have a strategy in their head, but they don't have anything written down. They're not following it with their teams. So it's just interesting to see that there is a difference from the haves and have-nots when it comes to content marketing.
And this might be a need for anecdotal and probably wasn't sort of covered in the survey per se, but of the ones that are doing the strategy and sort of tracking the ROI and getting a decent look at it, do you know if they're ones that have been doing it for a little while anyway, so they're a little bit more mature in this space than they were the early movers?
Yeah, we did not ask that question. So if we go to the qualitative, so we have a lot of comments on the qualitative. That seems to be the case. These are people that have been doing it a little bit longer. So in a lot of cases, yes, they had a strategy in their head a couple of years ago, and now they actually have documented it. Yeah. They believe in the approach to it. It stopped being experimental when maybe they saw a little bit of success along the way and say, look, we've got to formalize this process. How do we scale this thing? And that's when you really get into what is the process? Who do we need to fill this? What is the editorial mission of our platform going to be? Who is the audience we're going to target? Because we know we can't target multiple people with one message. So those things, yes, those are definitely the more mature ones that have been doing it for probably more than a few years.
And so the chances are they've got it socialized through the organization and a bit more buy-in from the top.
The number one thing that, I mean, they say, of course, the popular phrase is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And that's exactly the case when it comes to content marketing. You can have all the best intentions, but if you get into a sales-driven organization and you put content marketing in front of them and say, look, we want to create consistent content. We want to do it through these platforms, and we want to not talk about our product at all. And you go to a sales organization that says, wait, I don't like anything about that. We want more PDFs. We want more product brochures. We want to pitch more and more and more. And you're saying, no, that's not the way we're going to build a long-term relationship today. It doesn't bode really well. So that's when this really needs to be, we need to have small wins. Those small wins over time will lead to a culture change. But it is a very, very difficult thing to do in a large enterprise and a small company for that matter.
Is it possible to break down sort of the respondents? Are they more in professional services, more in FMCG, government organisations? And I take it they're for bigger organisations that were partook in this survey?
Yeah, the split right now in business to business and business to consumer focusing, they're actually all across the board. I mean, if you wanted to get that, Trevor, I'm sure we could find it. I mean, we have the data, and I believe it's in the back of the report that says what the breakout is, but it's a little bit all across the board. Right. I think the heavy one is actually in marketing itself, but then all across the board, you'll see the breakdown in all the different industries.
So in some industries, content, and some companies and organisations, the content marketing thrust, as it were, can come from the PR and comms department, although you think this is more from the marketing department per se.
Well, according to the research findings, the number one area that content marketing lives under is product marketing. Yep. Which is interesting. And then outside of smaller companies that have it live under the CEO, so that's really for small companies. The third one is PR. So people ask me all the time, well, where should it be? Should it be under product marketing? Should it be under comms? Should it be under PR? Where should it be? And the answer is it doesn't matter. Yeah. It actually doesn't matter where it is. Well, we find effectiveness in whatever company. It could be in marketing. It could be in PR, it could be in corporate communications. It doesn't matter because it depends on the culture of the organization. So it's not a very good answer, but it really depends on how the organization is set up to see what's going to be successful or not.
So one of the takeaways was compared with last year's results, Australian marketers are using fewer content marketing tactics on average. So 12 this year versus 13. So not much of a difference there. But does that say to you that people are probably tightening up a little bit and starting to see what works and maybe sticking with it with the longer term, rather than if that figure blew out to 20 tactics, that would scream, we're just having a crack at everything?
I hope that's the case. I absolutely hope. that people are saying, look, let's focus on the channels that work well. Less is more in a lot of cases. And like, I mean, just look at years ago, we're running to Facebook. We're running to Twitter. Oh, well, there's a new social platform. Let's go to that. Instagram, Pinterest, we're going to be on all of them. Now, I think you're a little bit smarter. They're looking at it at a measured approach and say, okay, there's a new channel. Yeah, let's look at that. Let's see what the possibilities are. Let's see how it plays out. Maybe we'll do something in that channel, but maybe not. Instead of just rushing and say, we got to have a page. I mean, if you remember when Facebook launched, our business has to be on there. No, it doesn't. Yeah. I mean, we know a lot of businesses that they're shutting down their Facebook page because, frankly, Facebook is a media platform now. Yeah. It's almost exclusively for businesses, pay to play now.
Yeah.
So do you need a Facebook page? No, a lot of businesses don't need a Facebook page. So I like that. I'm hoping that that's telling me that, look, we're going to focus on what is working and what's not working. We're going to stop, and we're going to focus on consistent publication to those channels that are working for us.
So as with last year, the top 3 tactics are social media content other than blogs, articles on websites, and e-newsletters. Any sort of comments on that? I mean, they're probably the major suspects, aren't they? So social media content, articles on the website, and e-newsletters were the top 3 tactics used.
I mean, my favorite one is email newsletters, because how many years have they been calling for the death of email?
Yeah.
And yet every year we see how important email is. Now, it's tougher than ever to cut through the clutter of the email box, but those that get through get attention and work really well. And this is one of the things, Trevor, that I didn't like about the report. And I think it was something around 30 or 32% from a goals standpoint focused on building subscribers. That's way too low to me. Yeah. That's where email comes in. I would like to see that way higher, because we know that email works. We know that email is being used, but we want it to be used more for how do we build ongoing subscriber relationships and build our audiences. And I'd like to see that as a goal more than a lot of the results are telling me there's a lot of activity going on, a lot of social media activity, but not necessarily a lot of, hey, we're going to build an ongoing audience, and this is what we want to have happen. So I'm going to switch the answer on you, but I think that subscription goal is critical, and I need to see that higher next year.
And it's actually a good thing from an ROI perspective, is that you grow that audience and, you continue your open rates, and you can test things. You can probably test more on an e-newsletter than probably anything else.
I mean, one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, to taking a content marketing approach is actually building an audience, owning the platform like a media company would. Where I grew up in publishing, and the whole goal was you didn't have anything unless you had circulation. If you don't have circulation, you have nothing. But what most brands, Australian marketers, are getting out there is they're creating all this content and they don't have an audience. Yeah. So we need to build that audience at the same time, or maybe even first, before we create all this content. They say if a tree falls, right? I mean, there's content falling all over the place, and there's nobody there to engage in that content. That's a problem. We've got to fix that.
And where do you see all that going in terms of Mark Schaefer, the blogger, talks about content shock, and as more and more companies are putting content out, you're going to have those that are doing the really good content. They're the ones that are probably going to hopefully seep through the consciousness of the audience and resonate a bit more. But it's a potential issue when everyone's just throwing a lot of content out there, and everyone's a content marketer, it seems, at the moment. So America's probably a little ahead of Australia, and that's a question I want to ask for you, whether or not that is the case or it's just a perception. What are you seeing over there in terms of this?
Well, first of all, I mean, I love Mark Schaefer, a good friend of mine. I don't agree with him on the idea of content shock. If content shock was a thing, we'd have been there when the printing press was invented. We'd already have too much content to engage in. Like, what are we going to do then?
Yeah,
we've always had too much content. I think that, there's a percent because of how we engage in consumers in content. There's more of a perception that, oh my gosh, but we still only have 24 hours in a day to engage in content. We pick and choose the ones that's going to be helpful to us, ones that's informative. And yes, is it challenging? I think it's always been challenging. Is it a little bit more challenging than it was yesterday? Maybe. I don't know. There's a lot of content out there. How do we get somebody's attention with all the stuff that they're competing with? Not even against other media companies, not other competitors, but other media companies, but Google and Facebook and everything else that's out there, and our talking to our friends or whatnot. As for the second question, I think that in a lot of cases it's a perception. I don't think that Australia. I mean, I've had the pleasure to go to Australia now. This will be my third year coming back for Content Marketing Sydney in March. I'm looking forward to it. I think that Australian marketers are really into the approach of content marketing. Yeah, if you want to say it's a 6 month, a year thing. I mean, I've talked to people that say yes, that we're 2 years behind or 5 years behind. I don't know if that's as much the case. Yeah. I think in a lot of cases there's maybe as much or more opportunity in Australia than there is in the United States, because maybe to your first point, maybe there's not as much competition in certain niche industries, depending on who you're targeting. So no, I don't think it's all that far behind. And I've had the pleasure of talking with a lot of Australian marketers, and they're saying, oh, we're so far behind. You need more speakers from the States coming over. But 6 months, maybe a year at the most, but I just don't see that big of a difference.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the usual suspects and the ones that have been out there doing it for a long time, like American Express or companies like that, they've had years under the belt, and I think companies here would look at that and say, well, they're pretty mature in their approach, and that's probably the really early movers, and if you based it on them, yes, we are, but when it comes to catching up, I think we're catching up pretty quickly, and I think as you say, everyone's learning as we go along, and new technologies are coming out all the time, and new research, so we're all learning together, which is. Companies have got their own business to run, and now they're media companies as well. So they've got a little bit. I
know, isn't it something? A little bit. Yeah. Oh no, I mean you're right. There's always going to be those outliers. There's those outliers everywhere. The Red Bulls and the Coca-Colas and American Expresses of the world. But I think in a lot of cases when North American marketers are better at talking about the case studies. I think that's where we preach it a lot more than it's preached in Australia, and that's one of our things that we want to make sure that more Australian marketers are talking about, not only their struggles but their successes in content marketing. So we have to do more of that together as an industry.
Yeah, it's a really good point you make. It's not something that Aussie companies like doing too much, and
I know it's like, let's talk about it. We need to learn together on this thing. Let's go.
Yeah, so. And I think it's the same with social media when that really hit and came through. We're starting to see major organisations, major telcos, and finance companies and banks and the like actually getting out and talking about their campaigns on social. So this is only content is an evolution of that as well. So it'll happen. I just think they probably need a bit of time under their belt to see the results and what they learn from it. In terms of spend on and budgeting for next year, for the next 12 months, that's sitting at 63% of Australian marketers said they plan to increase their content marketing budget for the next 12 months. And this is just a slight decrease from 69%. So I don't think there's much that could be read into that.
I think that we've seen, and it's interesting, we saw a little bit less on the effectiveness and a little bit less on the spending, because I think that, okay, those people that weren't very effective, they're not going to spend a heck of a lot more.
Yeah, good point.
But at the same time, even those there's no difference at all between the effective marketers and the not so effective marketers at content marketing from here's how much we're going to spend in the next 12 months.
Yep.
So what that tells me, Trevor, is that over the next 12 months, get ready for a whole lot more really bad, horrible content with no strategy behind it, because there's no difference.
You're the bearer of such good news.
Yeah, it's a little bit scary, right? It's like, hey, we're not doing really well at this all. We don't have a written strategy. We don't follow it at all, but we're going to spend more in 2015. So get ready, and it does make it a little bit harder for the ones that are doing a good job to cut through that clutter, but that's the path we have in front of us.
So if we said that 63% of Australian marketers plan to increase their spend next year, there was another stat that I found interesting. 73% of Australian marketers with a documented content marketing strategy plan to increase spending. So those that have documented their strategy and know where they're going and they're planning their budgets, there's actually more of those that are going to increase their spend.
Well, and I hope that's the case, right? Yep. I mean, if something's working those that have it documented, they have greater odds of being more effective, and so they're going to invest more in that. And I think that's right. Those are the most mature ones. They believe in the approach to content marketing, and they're working through issues like integration and scaling and things that they're going, once you get to a point where this is really working for you, then you're really seeing the dismantling of the traditional marketing organization as we've seen it, because you're changing roles, you're adding production people, you're adding broadcasters, you're adding journalists, copywriters, all a slew of new people that we haven't traditionally had in the organization. But at the same time, what's interesting is you have lots of different kind of content. So agencies are more valuable, I think, than they've ever been before, because even though content marketing is being done in a lot of cases internally, you still need some larger pieces of stories that need to be really well produced, that you need an outside take on, an outside team on. So some people read into that and say, oh, wait, well, maybe the agency is going away. So agencies have never been more critical than they are now, because we need different pieces of content put together. The difference is that we need agencies that don't just look at it in a campaign lens, that they say, look, we're going to tell this story. How do we tell this story this year? And already think about almost like Marvel does, where they're thinking now, how are we going to tell this story 8 years out? Yep. We need to be thinking that way now, instead of saying, how are we going to communicate in 6 months out? It needs to be 6 years out. That's very, very tough to do when you've got companies that are looking at quarterly reports all the time.
And when you also, well, exactly. And when you talk about agency, this is where the interesting thing's happening, and it's probably the same in the US, but ad agencies are now doing content. PR agencies have always done it, and the ones that I deal with and know, they've always been doing it. So this is probably a natural evolution for them. You've got digital agencies are now doing a heck of a lot of content, and then copywriters are getting together and becoming collectives and doing content, and video companies. So, well, shifting sands. It's over the last 2 years, Trevor, everyone became a content marketing agency, which is so fun, because you had traditional content marketing agencies, which were called custom publishers. And they traditionally did print magazines, and that was all they did. But they were really good at telling brand stories and figuring that out and learning that process. But now everybody, you're right, social media and search and everybody came on. Hey, everybody can do content marketing. The difference is you got to really figure out what their definition of content marketing is, because it's different across the board. And you really want to, if you're doing a strategy, you want to get those agencies involved in your strategic approaches, because as an agency listening to this, you don't want to just say, oh, here's what we want done, go do it, execution. If I'm an agency, I'm like, no, we need to be involved in the strategy. Because I don't know if that content, let's say you need one blog post a day, I don't know if that's the right strategy. Yep. But there's a lot of agencies that don't turn that down and just take the work. So we'll see where that goes. And I think it's interesting too about when we looked at the tactics, and it's the website, and funny that blog didn't really count in that, which I still don't understand. Maybe they put that under website and it's called articles or a newsroom. So that's a bit of a blurry area, I suppose. I always tell some marketing people within larger organisations don't call it a blog, because the people upstairs don't like the word blog, because it denotes people sitting in their pajamas in a basement living at home with them. That's a sidebar, of course. But now we've got lots more tools, slide share, infographics, video, obviously incredibly important, from the higher end to the grassroots stuff that's done on the fly at events and through iPhones and stuff, and we've just got such a vast array of mediums to play with. So it'd be really good, and I think that the smarter content marketers and the ones that are really getting this are taking big chunks of content and slicing them and dicing them in different ways, so people can consume that content in a myriad ways.
Well, it's a great point. And Robert Rose, who's our Chief Strategy Officer at Content Marketing Institute, he teaches this all the time. They'll say, somebody will say, I have got a really good idea for a blog. And we correct them and say, no, you've got a really good idea for a story.
Yeah.
How are you going to tell that story? And then you have to look at all those things, because you might not have a blog. It might be 6 blogs and an ebook and a podcast and something else, depending on what your goal is and who you're trying to target. So that's why we've had this. Hopefully we're seeing the difference, the change, but even in the research this year, you still see a lot of people I call it channel chasing. Yep. Oh, got to do a blog, got to go after Facebook, got to do SlideShare. No, you don't. Let's go back. Let's create a strategy. Let's figure out who we're targeting, figure out what their needs are, figure out what our needs are, and then go to an appropriate channel that makes sense. And then when we figure that out, then we can say, okay, how are we going to tell that story throughout all those channels and really get the most bang out of our bucket, let's say, for that content. So it's just a different kind of approach to it.
It's about telling bigger stories.
Yeah, I think we're thinking too small. Yeah. I think we're thinking too small as content marketers. And I talked about this in my book, Epic Content Marketing, the sixth essential need to be an epic content marketer is to have a goal of being best of breed. I don't think that brands out there have a goal to say, hey, how can we be the leading informational provider in this particular niche? I don't think they look at it that way, but I think you have to have that goal, because if you don't, you're not setting up the processes right. You're not hiring the right people. I would like to see more of that go on. And I don't think a lot of brands today think about it that way, because they think that's for media to do, or that's somebody else to do. I say, no, that's for you to do, because if you want to get somebody's attention, you better have pretty darn good content, and you better solve an ongoing challenge for them so they'll be more loyal and they'll want to ultimately buy from you at the end of the day.
One last question, Joe, and thanks for your time.
Yep.
What's the one thing just generally in the world of content marketing that's getting you excited at the moment?
Oh, I don't know if you're going to want to hear this, Trevor, but I'm going to. Actually, I like this as small as we always talk about digital, and it's going to be big, and content platforms and brands taking over a large portion of what we've traditionally known as the media and the Netflixes of the world and long form content, all those things. There's a lot of things that excite me. But actually, I love seeing some of these brands that are launching print properties. It just astounds me. Airbnb, which came out yesterday, just launched a magazine called Pineapple, and
really?
I'm just, Red Bulletin. Now you go to Red Bull, you go to newsstands around the world, and there's Red Bull's magazine there, and I'm just like, it's interesting to see that the larger brands around the world are leading in a lot of cases with their content brand being print, and it's important to us at Content Marketing Institute. We do that with Chief Content Officer Magazine, and I've been predicting this for a while, but I think maybe this year maybe that prediction will come true, where they're saying, look, we really are finding effectiveness at cutting through the clutter, getting their attention first in print, and then broadening that out through digital or through in person. So that's what I'm just amused by that, Trevor. We'll see. To the future. We'll see where that goes.
Well, that sort of is in. Makes sense with the name of your podcast, which is, what was it? This old marketing.
This old marketing.
So,
is our podcast.
It's a bit of a theme for you. Joe, thanks for your time. Where can people get you, reach you, find you?
So anything on the research at contentmarketinginstitute.com, and then anything about me, joepulizzi.com, and you can check out the new book and all that kind of stuff. But all the research is up there on the site. Just click on research on Content Marketing Institute.
Okay, thank you very much. And Content Marketing World in Sydney being organised now. When does that hit our shores?
Yep, 16 to 18 of March we'll be in Sydney, and then the 19th to 20th we're going to head over to Singapore. But looking forward to get back in Sydney for our third year in a row, and it was hopefully better than ever.
Big start to 2015.
You got it. Absolutely.
Thanks very much, Joe.
Thanks, Trevor. Appreciate the time.
Cheers.